Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everybody. I'll try and give you an international perspective as we go through the specifics of your project. Obviously, answer any questions you have. The perspective these days, 21st century transit planning is quite a sophisticated thing. The aspirations are much higher. It used to be, back in the 20th century, it was all about transit investment, improving conditions for transit users. We're now looking for more than that. We want economic benefits, environmental benefits, and use transit to shape the cities that we want to live in. So that's central to the theme for your project. In parallel to that, the sophistication of how you assess those kinds of projects. It's not just about the hard numbers, the economic benefit case anymore. It's a much wider, we call it multiple account evaluation. That's happening across the world. It's certainly been happening in the UK for the last 15, 20 years. So the methodologies we're using here that Metrolinx are using, that you're having to respond to Metrolinx with, are contemporary and they're up to date. So we're going to focus on LRT, but the key message is LRT in isolation is not sufficient. It's LRT as part of an integrated transit package. So it's local buses, express buses, transitway, BRT, regional rail, LRT. How all that fits together is critical to the case and achieving your wider objectives. So just bear that in mind as we go through. The other issue with these kind of projects is make sure it's demand-led. Never kind of jump to a conclusion that we want LRT. That's the answer now. What was the question? I've seen too many cities where they go just for the technology and try to backfit it, and it doesn't quite work. So the demand profile is important as well. So we'll go through. The presentation is a brief snapshot of what we call urban-style LRT, just so we're familiar with what we're talking about. We'll then look at the Metrolinx regional context, your wider policies, and then we'll have a little bit of a look over our shoulder at previous studies, how we got to this point, an update on the more recent studies and the up-to-date business case, and a look ahead to what happens next. So, urban-style LRT. The key components are there. I'll flag all the cities as we go along. They're examples. They're not meant to be taken literally, but we pick the best bits out of other people's efforts and take them for our project here. So this is Lyon in central France, typical low-floor LRT. The platforms are only about 350 millimeters high, so you can blend them into the sidewalks. The vehicles themselves are modular design. This one's about 30 meters long, about 200 passengers per vehicle, electrically powered, and you can see there the kind of developments that's attracted around transit. Multiple doors, level boarding, access for all. As you think about the future of your city, the changing socio-demographics, the aging population, this is a system that is accessible to everybody. And you can see there wheelchairs, bicycles, people with buggies, luggage, easy access, a key component of the project. We talked about modular design. This is Bordeaux, much longer vehicle. This is about 40 meters long. The message being we can adapt and add capacity to the system as required. And there's an example there. This is one particular manufacturer. All the suppliers kind of do this modular design now. You can pick and mix the vehicle cab and the branding and the livery of the vehicles. And we'll see examples of that through the presentation. The top illustration is Lyon, so there's the 30-meter vehicle, seating and standing, 200 passengers. The one below is Dublin, a longer vehicle, and you can see the capacity increases to about 300. So we're playing with those kinds of order of magnitude as we develop the case in Hurontario. We can go further than that as well. This is Minneapolis. We can couple vehicles together, so there's a 3-car train. You're looking at 600 passengers in that kind of situation. So a lot of flexibility to add capacity as long as we plan for it. But if we have that capacity and can't move it, it's all a bit pointless. So the other next key ingredient is to have exclusive right-of-way. And you'll see a lot of the systems around the world have this segregated right-of-way coupled with priority at traffic signals. So you get the journey speed and the reliability and the capacity. You're starting to build a picture of why light rail is potentially so important for moving lots of people. But as I said in the introduction, it's more than just transit planning, it's city planning. And this is one of the orbital routes in Paris. But an example of, you'll hear a lot of talk about complete streets, and I'm sure you're familiar with that kind of concept. So here you have active frontages, higher density development, wider sidewalks, cycle lanes, on-street parking, traffic lanes, but LRT on its own right of way. But also look at the landscaping. It's an attractive urban environment, semi-mature trees, all part of the design of that complete street. So there are those opportunities for Hurontario, and I think it's, as I said, more than just about transit planning. We talked about that integrated network. Here's an example from San Diego. It's very easy at cartoon level to adopt principles of integrated transit. It's more difficult to make it work in practice. Here's a great example, very simple cross-platform interchange from local feeder bus onto LRT. That's the kind of detail we have to get into to make it successful. You add to that the integrated ticketing, the information. It's as seamless as possible to make it as attractive as possible for as many users to leave their car at home. So it's adding transportation choice. There's also the scope for transit-oriented development. This is Dublin. The system opened in about 2004. It was developed alongside, this is in the old Docklands area. There was a Docklands development company set up to do the integrated planning of the land use to fit with the LRT. So you have that higher density, mixed use development focused around the LRT stops. And again, this is the theme we want to talk about today. There was mention of people in shorts. LRT can operate in all types of weather. The likes of Edmonton, it's usually the last man standing. As everything else shuts down in bad weather, the light rail can continue. So again, you have that reliability component that you're benefiting from. So that's the snapshot on what urban style LRT is. Now going to look at a little bit on Metrolinx. That's Paris. That's a 2-car train. So that's probably got capacity for about 500 passengers, just to give you a flavour of the scale and the size and the potential. But there's a long history to this project, and it fits with the Metrolinx and regional context. So you have the places to grow. You're familiar with that, the urban growth centres, the mobility hubs, the intensification corridors, the transit corridors. It's all part of the background as to why we're doing this particular project. The big move has encapsulated that. As part of that process, when Metrolinx was established, they wanted to assess all the various projects, so they set up a standard benefit case assessment. Picking up on that international background, it's more than just the economics, it's what we call the multiple account evaluation. You see the various headings there. All the projects have had to be assessed against that, and we'll come on to more detail later on, but the Hurontario-Main LRT is in their next wave list. It's one of their top 15 priority projects, and that's significant. I've seen a lot of projects around the world where promoters will bash away on their own, trying to justify it without any support from next level of government. You have it here, and don't underestimate the importance of that. The BCA for this project looked at BRT and LRT. We'll come back to that a bit later on. Let's turn to Mississauga. That's Montpellier, and I said you can choose different liveries. I don't know whether you like that one, but certainly makes an impression down in Montpellier. You have the regional fit, you have the strategic fit at a local level. You're clear on your vision, and is there developing a transit-oriented city. So the policy is there, the vision is there. How do we actually make it happen? Well, there's your move to intensification. You're already, I think, the 6th biggest city in Canada. An amazing transformation over the last 30, 40 years. But I think a recognition now that you have to almost start growing upwards rather than outwards. And there's the intensification there, focused on the downtown. You have the major nodes, the community nodes, the intensification corridors, and the major transit corridors, the transit way and the LRT are going to be the focus. So you have the joined up thinking between land use and transit, which is to be commended. You're way ahead of other cities. And it's important because if you look at those population employment figures, all the analysis we've done to date is based on 2031 forecasts. Still considerable growth to accommodate. How do you do it? It's not spread right across the city. It is concentrated and it's linked to transit. That's the key to making this successful. But look beyond that, the bottom line, 2041, you're still growing. You're still growing. So again, you have to think ahead and future-proof your decisions now in terms of transit investment to anticipate those things happening in the future. And zooming in on downtown, the Downtown 21 Master Plan, creating an urban place in the heart of Mississauga. So it's a very ambitious transformation of what's out there at the moment. And I think it's a fantastic piece of work, very visionary, and it has some real hard objectives in there. 72,000 additional residents, or total residents, 69,000 jobs, developing an office quarter to complement Square One, to complement Sheridan and facilities like we're in today. You need transit to make that happen. We've done a downtown movement plan linked to the LRT. There's 4, possibly 5 LRT stops serving that downtown if you include Matthews Gate. Essential that you develop the high density, high quality environment around those LRT stops. The transfer point on Rathburn with the transitway is going to be a particular opportunity for high density development. So they're all key components, very, very important. If you look at the regional context, I know there's been a lot of commentary about the prominence of east-west movements, and you can see it there with the highway network, with the rail in and out of downtown Toronto. But this is an important corridor, and it's part of that wider network. If you think of the importance now that Metrolinx are placing on the regional express rail network, the LRT links in at 3 locations, at Brampton, at Cooksville, at Port Credit. It's part of that integrated network. So you're thinking ahead, there's already been mention of the opportunities around Port Credit. So it's there. We have to be careful when we plan the LRT. We talk about priority and signal priority at junctions. We have to balance that out with the requirements for east-west movements, and that will be a constraint on the capacity we can provide with LRT. There's lots of transit choices, as you'll be familiar, local buses, the Viva kind of BRT network. The top right is Eugene in Oregon, segregated BRT. Bottom left is a project our colleagues in South America worked on, the Transmilenio BRT is probably one of the most famous in the world. But you look closely, it's a double lane in each direction. It's a very extensive system, and particular to kind of South American expectations on transit provision. You've got LRT, you've got subway, so all of those options have been looked at. But before we jump into decisions on mode, let's look at the key decisions. It's the link with land use, it's the wider city shaping objectives are driving this process. Think network, we've already covered that. And then think about the particular corridor, the route length, the stop spacings, the function, is it local, express, regional, or combinations? What opportunities are there for right-of-way? And then you start, and only then start to look at the technologies. Think about their key characteristics, the comfort, the accessibility, simple things like the availability of a seat. You can't claim quality benefits if you can't get on the system, or if you can, but you can't find a seat. So you have to be very careful that you're honest about what you're providing in terms of capacity. Then there's the bucket of cold water, which is how much is it going to cost to build it and operate it. And again, those factor into the business case. So there's been a lot of work, earlier transit assessments going back to 2008, 2009, the directions report, the corridor master plan, and then the benefit case that was done by Metrolinx. That's all been superseded by more recent work, but you can see there a range of options looking at LRT, BRT and combinations of in the corridor. The early directions report established the vision for the corridor, that it was all about shaping the city, about the quality of the environment. And for that reason, I think it screened out subway. Automated guided transit is similar to the kind of SkyTrain or Scarborough elevated systems, and monorail you'll be familiar with. Those were screened out on a range of criteria: capacity, cost considerations, fit with the built environment, and effect on the Main Street concept that was developing at the time. So that study led to a conclusion that BRT and LRT be taken forward. There's an extract of the report. It shows that existing transit use in the corridor is already putting you mid-range, comparing against other systems. I'm always a bit nervous about these comparisons because there's lots of different factors that affect the analysis, but it shows that there already is potential for transit use in the corridor, which you'll be familiar with. Moving on, the Corridor Master Plan was an award-winning exercise, I think. It started to pick up on the land use and the urban design and this vision to create a beautiful street, which was actually one which in subsequent work caused us some issues of how you define a beautiful street, but we'll come back to that. Extensive analysis, public engagement led to the conclusion that LRT is the preferred solution. And again, an extract from that kind of document. Again, a health warning. This is kind of the theory of BRT versus LRT in terms of capacity under different conditions on shared running, on right through to exclusive right-of-way. We have to be careful on that when we apply it to our particular corridor. As I've mentioned already, the east-west crossings and the ability to get the capacity and frequency has to be carefully judged. So there's the conclusions of the master plan work. It's starting to look at this wider multiple account approach. Those are the factors that were covered, including the environmental assessment, and there's the ranking and their overall conclusions that LRT was the preferred option, with the combined BRT, LRT coming second. But the base case, the do nothing, is not to be contemplated. I think the conclusion was investment in transit is needed to meet those wider visions to shape the city. In parallel to that, there was the Metrolinx work, and again, that looked at the combinations of modes. Slightly different. It's very difficult. We get on to comparing all the results of these assessments later on. Be careful. When this analysis was done, it was for a 30-year appraisal period. It was a light rail route straight through with no downtown box. So there are differences, so it's very difficult to do a direct comparison. That came out with the same conclusion. LRT had the highest benefits. On the basis of that and the master plan work, LRT was selected for further study. It wasn't the recommendation of this study, but it was the conclusion of all parties concerned. And again, Metrolinx have done further work since then. This is from their investment strategy work. They set up an advisory panel. This is an analysis of the overall costs of the different modes, and you can see the big subways and elevated LRT with the big structures have high costs. You can see that at-grade LRT is the middle column there, which includes the operations and the financing all wrapped up together, but it's maybe something you want to look at in more detail later on. So the master plan, a very clear vision, and it goes back to the principles I talked about at the beginning. It's not just about transit. You can see there the highlights in red are my own highlights, but easy, reliable, frequent, comfortable, convenient light rail. All those key components I've highlighted have to be addressed to achieve that. But it links as part of a wider network. So we've got the network connection, which is good. The beautiful street has to be translated into real designs on the ground, and we'll come on to how we tackled that. But again, it's to a wider aim of vibrant economic activity, livable, connected, mixed-use neighbourhoods. So it's not just about putting transit in because transit would be fun. It's to trigger this wider benefit and the intensification in the corridor, which is amplified in the third point. The transit-oriented development is really the key to the future growth of the city. And at the time in the master plan, that was the kind of vision turning into kind of cartoon-style impressions of what it might look like. Segregated LRT, still lots of traffic, bits of development happening. Quite easy to sketch it at that level, isn't it? You have to take it on to a further stage. The last 2 or 3 years seems like longer, but we've been doing the preliminary design and engineering. This is Minneapolis, a good example of, this is actually a central reserve. There's LRT running either side of this, but they've made a little linear park in downtown St. Paul, part of the Twin Cities. Just an example of how you can transform a city and that new development in the background as well. But the preliminary design and engineering has really taken on the project to a next level of detail. Again, international comparison, it's a requirement to flesh out the detail on the designs, the engineering, the ridership, the costs, to get a more robust business plan. It's what's required from higher levels of government to justify the funding. It's the material you'll need as and when you move to procurement and ask bidders to put a price to the project. They will need this information in this level of detail to proceed. So it might feel like you're just doing endless studies, but it's all with a means to an end. It's very, very important stage that you've completed. So you can see there just a checklist of what's been produced. Detailed alignment plans, stop designs, complete streets at 1 to 1,000 scale. So we're getting into detail, horizontal, vertical alignments, new structures. The bridges at QEW and Cooksville have been looked at in detail, the crossing of the 403. All that detail has been developed. We have an ultimate transit network plan, so we've reduced some of the bus coverage that's replaced by LRT. We have the LRT operating plan and costs, which we'll come on to later on. A system design guide, minimum standards that will be required to create the corridor that you're after. More detailed ridership forecasts, the traffic assessments. There are impacts on traffic. We're taking space away and reallocating it for LRT. How does that then all fit into business case, multiple account evaluation? You've done extensive public information centres. They've been well covered. You've done the environmental report, and you have your TPAP approval. Again, a major achievement for the project. It's sending out a message to the government, to the private sector, that this is a serious project. You're making very good progress, in my view. So the definition of the project now, we've refined it. The loop up in Brampton's disappeared. The connection right down into Port Credit has disappeared, and that's all been documented. So we have a 23-kilometre route. It's a very long route, 26 stops. We've gone for 2 overlapping services from the north and the south, overlapping in the downtown, and we'll come on to that later on. A 5-minute headway in the peak period. So we have an end-to-end journey time, Brampton down to Port Credit, of 46 minutes, with an average operating speed of 28 kilometres an hour. That's good for an urban transit system. It's reliable as well, because the whole route, apart from a little piece through the heritage area in Brampton, is segregated. We have medium to high signal priority. We recognise that some of the east-west major junctions we won't get automatic priority for LRT, but it's all in there in the assessment. It's all at grade. It's all double track. I've mentioned it's all mostly segregated. The stop locations are not just scattered on a whim. They're there to serve particular destinations and neighbourhoods. They do integrate with GO and Transitway and local services. The average stop spacing is 900 metres, but it varies along the route, as you'd expect. Significantly, we've allowed for 90-metre platforms. So go back to those earlier photographs. We could accommodate a 3-car light rail train if we wanted to. So we've future-proofed the project. We have all those classic key ingredients of high-quality light rail embedded in the project. Segregated, signal priority, high capacity. So it's exactly what's required to help you in the future. Very quickly, on Complete Street, some illustrations of typical traffic-dominated low density. We're going to take 2 lanes out to provide for LRT. And you can see there that the development we want has to grow around the stops. We have surface level crossings, we have mid-block crossing at the top of the diagram. Ultimately, with complementary land use policies, you're looking at the TOD, the higher density, the complete street components clustering around the LRT stops. So that, in snapshot, is how it's envisaged. That's translated into these detailed plans, and we have these for the whole route now. A series of design workbooks. You can see the detail there. The junctions have been modified. The pedestrian access, you can see there in purple, is an island platform in the middle of the street. Good access to it. The mid-block crossing. This is up at Eglinton. But we have this level of detail now for the whole corridor. And all of that has allowed us to update and produce more robust capital costs, operating costs, to plug into the updated business case. We talked about mobility hubs at cartoon level. Here's the next level of detail. You can see there a 3-car LRT, but the crossing straight into a new entrance. This is Cooksville, straight in as an as convenient as possible connection with the RAR. This is how you begin to shape your city. This is how you'll attract people in. As and when the office space kicks off in the downtown, you have outward migration out of Toronto on RAR onto LRT into your new office in downtown Mississauga. That's the potential that's there. In terms of ridership, we have a massively complicated transit ridership forecasting model. It's illustrated there. It covers the whole of the GTHA. It covers the morning peak period. It's 2031. It's up to scratch. It's as good as any models we've used elsewhere around the world. We've also used that for traffic impact assessment and looking at the traffic signals in detail. So again, all of those elements feed into the business case. This photographs Barcelona. Again, it's segregated, easy access, surface crossing, higher density development. So just to give you a flavour of it's happening elsewhere, it can happen here. So the business case, it's driven by that strategic policy fit. So it's the city's shaping aspirations, the growth plan, the urban growth centre, the intensification corridors. Those are the pillars against which we measure the performance of the project. Just the Metrolinx process. You are a next wave project. They expect you to do the benefit case analysis. They will then do the prioritisation of projects. If you pass through those phases, you get to implementation planning. And I think it's significant that within Metrolinx, we've been through the investment strategy division, and now in their rapid transit implementation team, they have a director solely responsible and only working on this project. So it says to me that Metrolinx are gearing up for the next stage, and I think you are high up there in their prioritisation of the next wave projects. I think that's pretty clear. But their requirements are the three pillars, fits with your strategic plan. It's quality of life, it's environment, it's economy. So those are the measures we have to kind of demonstrate that we achieve. On the multiple account evaluation, we've covered the different categories. We include and we can claim reliability benefits, health benefits, urban realm benefits, all those key components. There's always a tendency around the world to try, economists always want to put a monetary value on everything. It's not always possible, so the multiple account will be a mix of quantitative and qualitative assessment, and that's acceptable. So we have the capital costs. The economists like to talk in terms of present value, so they'll extrapolate out 60 years, then discount it back, and it's all in common currency, as it were. The real cost as of last year for the project is 1.5 billion. We've updated the operating costs and ridership and revenue, and we compare it against business as usual. Again, standard procedure that Metrolinx will expect to see. The benefit to cost ratio, basically, if the costs balance out with the value of the benefits, you get 1-to-1 that's break even. We're obviously looking to exceed that and show that there are more benefits than costs. But oddly, I think, a lot of cities and agencies and countries around the world will set a threshold. If you don't achieve it, you don't proceed. There is no threshold for benefit-cost ratio in Metrolinx, but I guess that's just a detail. In terms of operations, for the evaluation we've done, we've assumed an overlapping service. So you have Brampton to Square One, round the loop and back again, and the same from Port Credit. This is for the purposes of the business case only. We can mix and match, we can run different service patterns. The future-proofing of the project has allowed for that. The junction designs, that track layout around the downtown gives you that flexibility. But for the purposes of the business case, this is what we've looked at. So you have the run times assuming medium-high priority traffic signals. You see the run time there. 5 minutes in the peak, 10 minutes in the off-peak is the headway that's been looked at. And on the bus network, we've taken out basically duplicating services, and you can see them listed there. There is scope to restructure the bus network more radically to fit with LRT, and that's maybe something to be looked at in the future. So there you have it, the ridership forecast. I think the column on the right is the one to concentrate on. This is the most up-to-date. We have annualization factors based on existing profiles of transit use. We have all the elements in, and you're looking at over 34 million passengers a year on the LRT. So it certainly fits the profile and the capacity of the style of LRT we've designed. In terms of the detail of the business case, here are all the different accounts. So for the transportation account, we have all the obvious benefits: time savings, reliability for passengers using the LRT. We have auto user benefits, people transferring to LRT and leaving their car at home, accounted as savings on operating costs and safety. And you also attract additional riders to the system. You're looking at an additional 3.1 million riders per annum by 2031. So that's all on the benefits side. On the financial side is then the costs, including renewal costs. We're assuming on a 60-year time horizon that you'd replace the whole fleet of light rail vehicles after 30 years. So that's all costed in. You then got the revenues that are generated. The end result is you get a benefit cost ratio, looking at 2031 population employment growth of 1.14 to 1. So you have benefits. On the financial account, you have benefit as well of 1.2 to 1. So it's up there. It makes the grade in terms of those accounts. It has wider benefits. You see the mode share on that first line on the environmental account. Shifts considerably, doubles the mode share in the corridor by 2031. That transfer results in benefits. There's reduced vehicle kilometres on the road. That then has related environmental benefits, greenhouse gases and other components. The particulates as well are reduced. So all of those are counted in. On the wider economic development account, there are benefits to employment during construction and longer term. Those have all been factored in. Movement of goods has a cross against it. It will be something to be looked at in detail, how that fits potential disbenefit to goods movements, but it's manageable, I think, but we recognise it there. There's also potential for land value uplift. We've looked at examples around the world for residential commercial property. The value increases in terms of proximity to high order transit. There's an allowance in there, and you can see a value has been placed against that as well. So all those components are all added in. There's then the social and community account. This is the catchment in the corridor. You can see there's less numbers and more ticks and crosses, so this is the qualitative elements kicking in. But you can see urban realm benefits, triple ticks for land use shaping. I think it's recognised that the benefit that the project will bring. Deliverability account is, again, the kind of sense check. This is all great in terms of numbers and case. How do we actually get it built? There will be impacts during construction. No surprise there. Constructability, it's standard product. It's low floor, it's at grade. There are very few major constraints. So it's recognised as broadly constructible. The funding, procurement, governance, risk management are all work still to be done, as you'd expect. That's the next stage of the process, if there is a decision to proceed. So we have, again, all the components summarised there. We've tried to put it on a common base just to compare, but I think that the right-hand column is the one to focus on. This is the most current, and it details the bottom line, the 1.14 benefit cost ratio. But we don't think that's necessarily reflecting the full benefit of the project, because we talked about at the beginning the land use intensification. So what we've done is a further test of the business case. We've taken those 2031 population employment figures with help from your planning staff, have reallocated those along the corridor. So the total remains the same, but the allocation distribution is different to reflect a TOD style corridor. We've rerun all the analysis, and you end up with a much improved benefit cost ratio of 1.8 to 1. So I would argue that should be your central case, that it's the best fit with your vision. So again, we've added that column on the right-hand side for comparative purposes. So a lot of work has been done. Where does that leave us? the conclusions. This is Bern in Switzerland, a transit hub for 4 LRT tracks, trolleybus, local bus, and off to the right of the photograph is the main railway station in Bern. Give an example of how others join all their transit together. So the conclusions, Hurontario-Main LRT will be a city shaper. It does support your wider growth objectives. We have, through this latest preliminary design and engineering, future-proofed the project in terms of journey, speed and reliability. We've future-proofed it in terms of capacity with 90-metre platforms. And we have produced those detailed designs. We have comprehensive ridership modelling. That's all been processed through. You have your TPAP approval. I mentioned it already. It's a significant achievement. And I think congratulations to you as a city for achieving that. The business case is robust. The central case is good. The TOD test, which I think fits with your overall objectives, is even better. The final point, don't forget the 2041 growth forecasts. Those aren't going to go away. They're already out there under discussion. How you accommodate your share of that growth, again, it leads you back to this high-order transit solution. So just to finish with a few more pictures to waken us all up again. This is Geneva, but again, big, high-capacity transit right in the middle of their downtown, right in the middle of their financial district. It's how people get to work. You see very few people driving into downtown Geneva. This is Dresden, an example of integration between regional rail and LRT. Behind that light rail vehicle, there's an elevator which takes you straight to platform level for the rail. But we're talking about LRT being part of your urban living and lifestyle. This is middle of Amsterdam. I like taking photographs when I'm sitting in a bar. It's much more civilized, but most of those people don't even appreciate there's a light rail there. It's just part of their life. It's not, they expect it to be there, but they're just getting on with their lives. Can be used as city shaper. This is back to Lyon. The quality of that street is wholly redesigned around LRT. And you have the potential to do it here. So thank you.